Welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and business valuation expert. And today we are with Lisa Zeiderman. Lisa's a managing partner at Miller Zeidman, LLP. She's a matrimonial attorney, family lawyer, and CFL, which she'll tell you more about, and a certified divorce financial analyst, which some people know about. She also regularly handles complex financial and custody divorce matters for high net worth individuals. I think just general top couple things that if I'm a business owner and I'm getting divorced in New York, what should I be aware of? What are some interesting things that could kind of, get me caught up, or, what are unique to New York?
So I think the first thing that you should understand is that your business is going to be subject to what we call equitable distribution, which is a distribution of the value of the business. So you, as the title owner of the business, are likely going to keep your business, and what's going to happen is it's going to be valued by a forensic accounting firm, likely, who will come in and provide a value. There'll either be a neutral forensic accounting firm, perhaps someone that both your attorney and your spouse's attorney choose together, or someone that a court appoints if you're in court, or you have the choice most times to have your own expert do the valuation, but then expect that you may have, an expert from your spouse as well. I think that the other thing that you need to know is that in New York, it is rare, and I mean really rare, that after the valuation, when you're dividing up a business asset, that your spouse will receive 50% of the value. That is a very rare occurrence. And the reasoning is that the person who actually is the title owner to the business is usually doing most of the work in the business, making the biggest contribution to the business. And so what's going to happen is your spouse may end up with a valuation and then some sort of a percentage, almost always likely less than 50%. But again, depending upon the circumstances in the case, the length of the marriage, for example, your spouse's contribution to the business, was your spouse actually working in the business, that will drive the percentage up. Other things that your spouse may have done for the business, contributing money, contributing separate property funds, all of those things will be factors. I think what is also surprising for a lot of business owners is how in-depth the discovery becomes. And when I say the discovery, the documentation that you as the business owner will likely have to provide to the quote expert or your spouse's attorney. And this is a very important piece because I think that people aren't used to giving over their documentation for their businesses. And they sometimes find it very offensive, very upsetting. Somebody is going through their general ledgers. Somebody is going to be looking at the tax returns. All of this information is going to be important. What expenses are you putting through the business? Somebody may say, it wasn't right that you paid your mortgage from your business, for example. And so those kinds of expenses become normalized. And when you're doing the value, and they get added back as if they were income. And that's another piece that's important. So I think that there are some surprises for business owners. I think that there are ways, as you're heading into marriage, perhaps to prevent some of this. But I think as a business owner, if you're married and you're going through a divorce, you have to expect that your business is going to be valued and that you are going to be actually handing over discovery to your spouse's attorney and evaluator.
Well, and I thought it was interesting because you had said, because normally that type of analysis of the business to determine if it's, 30, 40, 50% of the business is normally what we see when we're tracing separate assets. And that's what I was asking you. I was like, okay, well, hold on. So what if you say that it's separate? Is that still a situation then that you can claim separate and you have to prove it, or where's the burden of proof there?
Great question. So in New York, the law presumes that if a business is created during the marriage, first of all, it is marital property. There's a presumption. Anything actually that is created during a marriage is going to be marital property. If your business actually existed, meaning you had your business interest or your business prior to the marriage, then that may be separate property. And what also may be is that the appreciation of the business during the marriage may become the marital property. Okay. So what you're going to want to do in the case of you've had the business, prior to the marriage, perhaps it's a family business even, and we can talk about that because that adds some complexity. But let's just say you got married, you had a great business, and now you are married for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And your business has increased in value during the marriage. You had it before the marriage, but now it's increased in value. Well, what's going to happen is there's still going to be a valuation. It's going to be a valuation as of the date of the marriage. That will be your separate property, right? So that's your separate property. And then as of the date, usually, of the commencement of the action, the divorce action. So maybe when you filed a summons or your spouse filed a summons, that particular date is very important. And you're going to actually see what was the appreciation, if any, during the marriage. And then that becomes the essentially the target, right, for a distribution. Very important that those two pieces are done actually and valued. And then that's your separate property, the property that you had prior to the marriage. But it is going to be on you to actually produce the documents so that the valuations can take place. And it is important to have your records. So a lot of times it's the most difficult part of this. You don't have your records. And then what do? And so it is tracing. And it is tracing of your separate property and making sure that you've done that, and then making sure that obviously the appreciation is valued.
Well, and I know that some states look at appreciation in the business as different than income in the business. Like we'll have retained earnings, or we'll have, they kept all that money in the business kind of situation and they kept it from me. And so do you have issues where you're having to look at that separate appreciation or that marital appreciation or income? How do we deal with that?
So income is one part of this, and you're going to look at income for purposes of spousal support, child support, etc. But you're still going to be looking at the appreciation, because the appreciation is your equitable distribution, right? That's going to be, frankly, your lump sum payment that you're going to be paying out. Maybe it's going to be some percentage. Usually I'm going to say that when it concerns appreciation, as opposed to a business that is just created during the marriage, the percentages tend to be less that your spouse is going to get. So that's also important. Mm-hmm. We've seen cases where maybe it's 10%, 20%, maybe it's a long-term marriage, 25%, but it's a very different situation than when it was created during the marriage. And go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering if people proactively value their businesses at the date of marriage in order to preserve it.
It's such a good question. So I would say, that it's great if you have that valuation. Sometimes if you can do that, that's great, because then you have it. And you can go one step further. You can create a prenuptial agreement. And you can actually, in your prenuptial agreement in New York, you could delineate your business as your own. You can delineate the business that you created prior to marriage. And by the way, you can delineate the appreciation as your separate property too. And that's why it's so important for business owners to consider prenuptial agreements. If you are a business owner and you are getting married, you really should consider a prenuptial agreement. And if you're a business owner and you're already married in New York, you might consider a postnuptial agreement.